The following are the learning objectives that I hope you will be able to achieve, such as to distinguish among the different production costs, to understand the relationship between output level and costs level, differentiate between diminishing marginal returns and returns to scale, to comprehend graphical illustration of costs and their relationship to output, to distinguish between economies of scale and economies of scope, to discuss specific companies on how they try to achieve economies of scale, and to discuss specific companies on how they try to achieve economies of scope. The following are the contents: costs and output, the law of diminishing marginal returns, economies of scale, economies of scope, business case discussions. Okay, we begin with marginal cost, which is an important concept relevant to the entire presentation. The marginal cost affects the unit costs, as will be explained later. Marginal costs exist when the total cost of production includes variable costs. Fixed costs do not contribute to a change in total costs. Since the marginal cost leads to a variable cost, therefore with zero variable cost or zero marginal cost, fixed cost is equal to the total cost. Marginal costs are defined as the overall change in price when a buyer increases the amount purchased by one unit. Marginal costs can help firms determine the level at which it achieves economies of scale. It is calculated as follows. Marginal cost equals change in total cost divided by change in quantity. What relationship exists between costs and break-even quantity? By the way, the break-even quantity is the level of production or output wherein the firm neither loses nor gain any profit. And the break-even quantity is computed using the formula. Quantity Q is equal to fixed cost FC divided by the contribution margin, which is price minus MC or marginal cost. The contribution margin is here in price minus marginal cost. And it is this difference now between price and marginal cost is what is left, okay, to contribute to covering fixed costs, covers fixed costs. So our divisor is price minus MC. So if this is a large value, no, if this is a large value, it means that we have price greater than MC, or the MC is smaller. Okay, so if we have a small value for MC, we have a bigger divisor for fixed cost, and that will result in a smaller break-even quantity. Okay, and if we have a big value for MC compared to price, we'll end with, or let's say we have price which is $5, and then we have marginal cost which is quite large, let's say 4. So we'll have a smaller value to divide FC, and it gives us a bigger quantity. So the smaller the bigger the MC, the bigger quantity will have. And the smaller value of MC to be deducted from price will have a larger value here. A larger value dividing fixed cost will result in a smaller break-even. Tama ba? Larger MC, we have a smaller divisor. Smaller divisor, dividing FC will lead to a greater output here. So the greater the MC, the greater the break even. The smaller the MC, the smaller the break even quantity. Of course, which is desirable? A larger break even quantity or a smaller break even quantity? Of course, better is if we have a smaller break even quantity. We only need to produce not that amount in order to prevent the firm from losing. Okay, it follows then that the firm can only earn if it can produce more, more than the break-even quantity. Okay, so for our example, um, given that fixed cost is 1,600 and the price per unit is 5 pesos and marginal cost is 2 pesos per unit, find the break-even volumes. Applying the formula, the break-even quantity is therefore 533.33, which means that at this output level, the firm is neither losing nor gaining any profit. For the firm to start earning profit, it has to produce more than 533.33. And not being able to achieve 533, meaning should the firm produce lower than this break even, it's going to start losing. Um, how about if the firm will produce at 700 units? Clearly, this is beyond the break even level. So we expect that the firm will earn an amount. Okay, so how will you compute this for the profit, given that Q is 700? Since at the level of 533.33, the firm is already able to cover the fixed cost and the variable cost producing at that break-even point. No, it has covered all of the costs. So we'll have to get the difference of 700 and 533 and multiply that difference by the contribution margin, which is 5 minus 2. So we have 3 times the difference between these two values. So that's how we compute for the firm's profit. How about if the firm will produce 400 units? So clearly this is below the break-even volume. Okay? And we expect that the firm will incur losses already. The loss will be the equivalent of the difference between 533 and 400, but multiplied by the contribution margin, but it's going to be a negative value. So that will be losses. We can find the break-even output level using a different method. This time using TR equals TC. TR means total revenue, TC means total cost. Total revenue is computed by multiplying price and quantity. Total cost, TC, is the sum of total fixed cost, TFC, and total variable cost, TVC. Okay, so we'll use now the B times Q plus TFC plus ABC times Q. Why do we have ABC times Q? Because ABC times Q equals TVC. Okay. And then we rearrange the, the variables, put together, okay, like values. So we have all Q's up to the left side, and then TFC remains at the right side of the equation. Since our price is 5 pesos and ABC is equal to the MC, which is 2 pesos, then Q is unknown. Okay, so we have 5Q minus 2Q equals 1600. So that's how we got Q equals 533.33, which is similar to using method 1. Okay. What relationship exists between total costs and unit costs? Unit costs will be extracted from total costs. Okay, first we have all of the total costs, such as total cost, which is the sum of TFC and TDC, total fixed cost, the sum of all fixed costs, total variable costs, which is the sum of all variable costs. We need the output level, okay, so that the output or Q, no, the Q will be used to divide TC, TFC, and TVC to get the unit costs. The unit costs are the following: average total cost or average cost, they mean the same, average fixed cost, and average variable cost, which could be obtained by the following formula. AC equals TC divided by Q, the unit cost. AFC, the unit fixed cost, is equal to total fixed cost divided by quantity. And average variable cost is equal to total variable cost divided by Q. Actually, AC is also the sum of AFC and ABC, aside from AC being equal to TC divided by Q. And the most important cost here is the unit cost, no? The average total cost, or simply average cost, because this will influence or will give rise to economies of scale, economies of scale. There is a relationship between per unit costs and output, as illustrated here graphically. We have output along the horizontal axis increasing from left to right, 0 onwards. And then we have per unit increasing from 0 upward along the vertical. So the unit costs are MC, AC, ABC, and AFC. These are all unit costs. And notice that initially at 0 output, all of them are at high levels. And the moment the firm starts producing, will have output, so that with increasing output, the unit costs will be decreasing, all of them decreasing, and then reaches their minimum points. After reaching the minimum points, each of these unit costs will start to increase as output increases. It's really the increase in output that leads to increases in all of these unit costs, except for AFC, fixed cost. The tendency of this is to keep on decreasing until it reaches 0. It's the only unit cost that turns 0. Okay, and then later on, still 0. Okay, and that MC, or marginal cost, tends to pull down all the other unit costs and be equal to each of these costs at some point. And after that equality, MC becomes higher, no? And as it increases, as the MC increases, it tends to pull up AC, AB, and ABC. So that's the relationship between per unit costs and output. Decreasing and then increasing as output increases. So the unit cost now is, we now pay attention to AC, the average total cost, or simply the cost per unit. Let us see what happens to AC, or the unit cost, in relation to the output. Given that fixed cost, so we build a scenario. If fixed cost is given as 50,000 pesos, for example, what could this be? The major component of fixed cost are rent and salaries, and capital equipment, more of capital equipment and rent. Okay, so if there's 0 output, variable cost is zero. Marginal cost is zero. Therefore, total cost will be equal to the total fixed cost. No other cost will be considered. This means that the firm will still has to pay fixed cost. So this is already a loss incurred by the firm if there is no production, because no production, no revenue. Okay, suppose that the firm starts producing at 100 units and that the cost of each unit, variable cost of each unit is 20 pesos. What will be the total variable cost? ABC will be equal to variable cost per unit, BC, or ABC times Q. Okay, so computing for that using total cost, which is the sum of FC plus BC times Q. This is TBC, no? So the total cost will be 52,000. And 52,000 divided by output Q is equal to AC, which is 520. Okay, so at 520 is, what does 520 mean? This is the cost per unit, of all this produced, 100 units. So each of these 100 units costs 520 pesos to produce. So cost lang yan, no? Wala pa yung markup. Wala pang markup yan. Okay? So if the competitors are selling this product at much lower price, like 45, 450, or even the highest could be 500, no? Selling price na yun. Eh sa'yo, cost pa lang, wala ka pang markup, 520 na. How could we sell this? Diba? So it has the AC, no, is really an important cost. We have to reduce that, no? How could we reduce that? Perhaps by producing at a higher output level. So assume the same fixed and variable cost per unit. If there's a large order of 10,000 units instead of 100 units, let's see what happens to the AC. AC is now 25 pesos per unit, too far away from 520 pesos earlier. And this also, so at high output level, the AC is reduced to a much lower level, which is 25 pesos. Now, we can recall at this point a principle in the past, now, which is about pricing trade-off. To sell at a higher, to sell high, no? To sell at a higher price, you could sell less units. And selling at a lower price like this, you sell more. Okay, so this finds an illustration of that pricing trade-off. So what's the moral of this? We need a certain output level in order high, no? Most desirable is to produce at a higher level, which can bring down our cost per unit of production. That's why when clients, no, customers would ask for a quotation, the supplier would ask, how many? What is the output level? So that's an very important question. And then they do computations so that they will know if it can be produced, no? And if the price will be acceptable to the client. Sometimes they would ask, magkano bang budget mo? So that they could make some adjustments, no, in terms of raw materials to use. Okay, so ayun, tinatanong nila. But now, if the client's order is really big, no, like this one, well, the client can ask for lower price, no, to take advantage of the volume. Ibig sabihin, if that's the case, the client is partaking, no, part of the savings in production cost. Yun, kaya ngayon, pag kayo order ng malaki, maki-share kayo dun sa sa savings, no, sa cost savings. Ganon. Kasi you deserve a lower price because of that high volume. Okay, now, there's a limit to this high output. It's not always the case that you can bring down the unit cost. There are limits to this, and you'll see that later. Okay, first, we move on, no, to another concept, which is the law of diminishing marginal returns, wherein once again you see the relationship between output and input. So the focus now is in the input, no, not really in the unit cost. It's in the input. Okay. By the way, the law of diminishing marginal returns is sometimes called principle of diminishing marginal productivity, and the LDMR. No, this principle is only applicable, observable in the short run, during the short run production. Why? Because LDMR operates only um, when labor inputs, for example, which is a variable. Variable inputs are used with fixed input. Fixed input like facility and equipment. So if some of the inputs are fixed, and then we add or we lessen, no, or we vary the labor inputs, no, or at least one variable input, we could see how that variable input is adding, no, to the total output. So there is a relationship really between total input and total output. As illustrated here, we have a curve, no? And the curve illustrates the relationship between input and output. Increases in input and increases in output. And then we'll see decreases later. Okay. So assuming that there are fixed factors, and then we use those fixed factors with no with variable input like labor. So if these are labor inputs, with increases in labor inputs, as expected, the total output increases. Okay, so that's illustrated by this um, upward, no, upward this curve going upward. Okay, and also notice the steep slope, no, of this curve, and that illustrates the accelerated output. Now, increases in output is accelerated, no, from this point to this point. Okay, we call that phase most productive phase. Now, beyond this amount of input, more labor inputs are added, and it leads to increases in output, further increases in output, as you see that the upward curve continues, no? The curve continues upward. Okay? But then notice the deceleration in the addition to output. No? There is a decrease in the additional output. That's why this phase is called diminishing returns. And now beyond this maximum, the output starts to decline even with additional labor input. Okay, so what's the implication of this? It does not pay, or it does not make sense at all, no, to keep on hiring workers, additional workers, beyond this point, beyond this quantity of labor input. Why? Because beyond this point, we are incurring labor expenses, but at the same time, we're not adding any more to output. No? There is a declining output here, actually negative output already. We see a decline in the total output. And we call this phase the stage of negative returns. So we have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Stage of increasing, what do you call this? It's the most productive. And then we have diminishing returns, and then we have negative returns. Stage, 3 stages. To illustrate the law of diminishing marginal returns. So that only happens in the short run. Okay, by the way, this is the definition of the law of diminishing marginal returns. If one input in the production of a commodity is increased, while all other inputs are held fixed, a point will eventually be reached at which additions of the input yield progressively smaller or diminishing increases in output. Or you can say it in another way, no? Assuming that all other factors are constant, um, additional input of a variable input um, tends to increase now in terms of the returns now will increase up to a certain point beyond which the returns diminishes. That happens in the short run. Okay, now the law of diminishing marginal returns is different from returns to scale. Returns to scale is different because we're talking about the long run. No, this is applicable in the long run. But marginal returns, the LDMR, happens in the short run. And aside from that, returns to scale measures the change in productivity from increasing all inputs of production in the long run. And there are 3 types of returns to scale: constant returns to scale, increasing returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale. So we have constant, increasing, and decreasing. And when we talk about returns to scale, we focus on average cost or AC. But when we talk about law of diminishing marginal returns, the focus is on output and input. Okay, the variable input against the output. But here, the output, returns to scale, we look at the relationship between average cost and output. Not input and output, but average cost and output. Okay. So we look at AC, no? And in all cases, whether increasing, constant, and decreasing, the output is always increasing. Okay. And while the output is increasing, we look at the behavior of the AC. Is it increasing or what? Okay. So for when returns to scale, we will see that AC is falling with increasing output. Increasing output, AC is falling, decreasing AC. And by the way, increasing returns to scale is also called economies of scale. The second scenario. Uh, Still, the output is increasing, but AC is constant. Okay, so that's why it's called constant returns to scale. And then the third type, with output increasing, AC is increasing, AC rising, but output is increasing, AC increasing. That's why it's called decreasing returns to scale, sometimes called diseconomies of scale. Medyo hawig ko ng diminishing marginal returns. No? Okay. So graphically, the returns to scale can be illustrated. First of all, SATC, what are they? They stand for short run average total cost. So a long run curve consists of a series of short run ATC curves. So we have sub 1, sub 2, sub 3, and so on. So it's a series. And to construct the long run using the short run ATC, we consider the minimum points. Okay. Notice that the minimum points touches the long run curve. So we just consider the minimum points of short run average costs. Okay. Now, along the horizontal, we have units of output. And along the vertical, in relation to cost, okay, along the vertical, okay, increasing upward for the cost and increasing to the right for units of output. So we relate now cost and outputs. So initially, look at the AC. No, AC is decreasing with increases in output, and we call that first phase economies of scale with decreases in AC. And it comes to a point where AC is maintained in a constant value, constant AC, while increasing the output. That's why it's called constant returns to scale, that period or phase. And then beyond this, minimum efficient scale, beyond this, increasing the output leads to increasing AC, cost per unit. And we call that period or phase these economies of scale. So that's a graphical presentation of economies of scale using long run uh, ATC curves. There are companies that are able to follow or achieve economies of scale. Economies of scale are cost advantages companies experience when production becomes efficient, as costs can be spread over a larger amount of goods. So usually, economies of scale means the size, no? A size that is economic, parang ganun ang dating. Okay. So the major source of economies of scale, or what we call increasing returns to scale. The major factor of that is when producing in large quantities. No? As we had observed earlier, when producing 10,000 units of a product, that led to a very, very low cost per unit of 25 pesos only per unit. A business size is related to whether it can achieve an economy of scale. Larger companies will have more cost savings and higher production levels. So we had seen several companies, large companies, which are able to lower their unit cost, their unit cost, thereby offering products at lower prices. So the, the bigger company, the more efficient, the lower is the unit cost. It leads to lower price products. So if you are new, if you are new, in the, parang nasabi ko yan sa entry barrier, di ba? You're a newcomer in the industry. You have a smaller market, then you have small scale production. So you cannot achieve economies of scale. You have to have large demand in order to enjoy economies of scale. There's what we call internal economies of scale, and there's external economy of scale. Internal economies of scale is due to the following factors. Some of these, technical improvements, managerial, financial ability, monopsony power, or access to large networks. So these are just some. There could be other ways to
Miss,
for the most
nag-chat copy po
efficiency.
kayo.
Okay. External economy may come from government, like favors, in terms of subsidies, for lower taxes, policy, uh, policies, which gives special industries. I think no, our government is gives preference to agribusiness, no, to the agricultural sector. So those are um, some of the factors that we could put under external sources of economies of scale. Okay na ba? Hindi na choppy.
Konti pa pong choppy, Miss.
Okay. The opposite, uh, the opposite of economies of scale is diseconomies of scale. So with this, no, what does it mean? Increasing AC, no, increasing unit costs with increases in output. No? We go back to our example earlier of 10,000 units, diba, of production, of output, with the corresponding AC at 25 pesos per unit. Okay. Should the output level be increased? Let's say 10,100, 10,500. Okay, so that's it really depends no, or no, there are companies um, that cannot produce that much. No? They can only produce part of that, maybe. No? Meaning to say that there is a limit to each of the companies' capacity to produce. No? So it's a factor of capacity. If it goes beyond, no, if the if the output, the required output exceeds the capacity of firm, that would mean setting up another facility, hiring more workers, procuring more equipment, and that will start raising the cost per unit. So, ibig sabihin, class, there's a limit, no, to economies of scale. It can turn into these economies of scale, depending on the capacity of the firm. In our ebook, there is an example. I think the supplier or the company owner is called may pangalan, Akio Morita. Akio Morita. Who received a large order. And out that he will be incurring higher costs, no, beyond beyond the capacity of the firm, because he'll have to yun nga sinabi ko kanina, no, put up another facility, hire workers, train workers, so it may masakit sa ulo, no. So he'll have to, and it will takes time, di ba, to put up a facility. Paano kung ngayon ang order? That's why he just took, no, a portion of that order. Pumayag naman yung client. Okay? Kasi tumaas na nga yung AC niya, no, yung cost per unit. So ganun ang gagawin nyo din, no? You cannot grab the entire order. No? You have to do computations and see if your business could handle it. May turn out, no, that you'll be losing, no, kasi tataas yung cost mo, no, production cost mo beyond, no, if it's beyond your capacity. Yung iba naman ginagawa, nag-outsource nila, pero kung hindi ka sanay sa outsourcing, wag mo nang you can take the chance, no, pero you have to be ready, no, with the consequence of outsourcing. And there are conditions also, no, for outsourcing. That's beyond, no, that's beyond our discussion here. Okay, so medyo lalayo tayo. Okay, so dito lang tayo sa these economies and economies of scale. Okay, I hope you understood. So this economies of scale has something to do with capacity. Okay. So for our business case illustration, we have Walmart, no, to illustrate. economies of scale. Walmart buys products at a lower price than competitors, and it can distribute and sell high volumes of a product compared to its competitors. It has a highly efficient supply chain, which results in lower distribution costs per unit. As a simple example, it can always fill the trucks, which make the distribution costs per unit low. Okay. And add to this, in 2015, with Walmart already efficient, it even spent $10.5 billion on information technology. And therefore, smaller companies could not really compete, with Walmart because they cannot afford that level of investment in technology. Okay, so we could imagine Walmart to be running efficiently, uh, because of what we call a sophisticated technology, information technology, that it is able to have all of its systems running smoothly. Um, Everything is systematic, and that they are database, and backed up by information technology. So we could imagine its logistics, its distribution, warehousing, purchasing systems, um, even management systems, accounting, financial, R&D, all of these are running smoothly, and they are being run in a coordinated fa- function. It's like it's a big wheel being run by smaller, many smaller wheels, running um, very smoothly and efficiently without any clogs. Parang ganun siya. Isang gulong na may maraming gulong. No? Ganon. It's like a clock. No? Pag binuksan nyo yung clockwork, ganun yun. May mga small wheels ba? And then there's a big wheel being run by smaller wheels. Parang ganun siya. Kita ko yung economies of scale na yan. And there are companies that illustrate economies of scale, not only Walmart. And that's your assignment. Learning curve is relevant because a learning curve illustrates the ups and downs of cost, the costs through time. Sometimes it's called experience curve, cost curve, efficiency curve, or even productivity curve. Learning curves mean that current production lowers future costs. Why? Because a longer period allows the firm um, the chance or the opportunity to correct its errors, to learn better, and therefore gain expertise. Okay, so if that future time is now, it means the costs relevant at the firm which has a learning curve would mean that a firm has gained expertise and improvements as well, to be able to lower its unit cost reduction. A learning curve is a concept which graphically depicts the relationship between cost and output defined period of time. Normally to represent the repetitive task of an employee or worker. It is a visual representation of how long it takes to acquire new skills or knowledge. Okay, so time, yeah. Okay, so apart from economies of scale, we have economies of scope. Okay, This also happens kasi 'di ba yung marginal returns kanina, it's in the short run. And returns to scale or economies of scale happens in the long run. Okay, how about economies of scope? It doesn't matter. It's not about time. No? Scope is not about time. What we're looking at here is the number of products, the variation of products. Yun yung scope. Okay. The economies, it's the ability to lower the cost. Economies is about lowering the cost, and the scope is about variety of goods that can be produced. No? So what do we mean by economies of scale? It describes situations where producing two or more goods together results in a lower marginal cost than producing them separately. Rather than, diba, halimbawa, a company has two products. Okay. So, producing them separately would mean two separate machines, two different labor, two different facilities, okay, to produce those two products. But there's a better way of doing them. Why not produce them in the same facility, using the same machine and equipment, using the same labor? Okay. Ganun lang siya kasimple. Okay. Economies of scope means producing a variety of different products together to reduce costs, while the latter means economies of scale, producing more of the same good. So, in the economies of scale, we focus only on one product in terms of unit cost, one product lang. But in economies of scope, we're talking about producing not only one, but two or more products using the same facility. Yun, isang type, no? In order to cut down the cost per unit. To reduce costs by increasing efficiency. So that's the point. Using the same facility, the same inputs, lowers the cost. There's efficiency. Walang masyadong set up. No? Walang masyadong transition. Okay. Economies of scope can result from goods that are, number one, co-products or complements. Okay. So that's one, complements or co-products. Number two, complementary production processes. Complementary, sabihin, fitted together yung production processes. And then number three, goods that share inputs to production. Pareho ng labor, skills, requirement. Pareho ng capital, equipment, yung mga requirements, no? Required inputs, pareho lang. Saan nagkakaiba? Medyo a little variation, no, in the raw materials, baka doon lang nagkaiba. Or meron lang adjustment sa machine, no? Pipit-pihit lang, ganon. Okay. So, very minimal, no, adjustments to be done. Okay, so formulation, medyo binabago lang ng konti yung formulation. Okay. Not entirely different. Baga sa recipe, magkakahawig. Magkakahawig yung recipe. Parang, halimbawa, nagluto ka ng nilaga, no? Magluto ka ng maraming nilaga, bawasan mo, bago mong gawin sinigang. Ganun lang. O kaya, ginagawa ko last, no? Pinapakulo mo na yung, halimbawa, isang pork, pinapakulo yung maraming pork. Tapos, paghihiwa-hiwalay na sa final phase, no? Merong gagawing paksiw, merong gagawing sinigang, merong gagawing nilaga sa bandang huli, sa last phase. Parang ganun lang din. Similar to a manufacturing firm ng sardines, no? The sardines pass through the same machine, no? Tapos mangyari yan sa last phase, lalagyan nila ng flavoring, di ba? O pwedeng yan, pwedeng sweet and spicy, pwedeng Spanish sardines, di ba? Ganun lang, no? Ganun ang technique, no? to achieve economies of scope. Maraming na-produce, iba-iba, but they use the same facility, same labor, same equipment, no? Lahat pareho. May konting variation lang, no? In one of what we call processes. Tindihan. I hope naintindihan. So there are many more examples, no? Ang simple din, dyan sa labas ng FEU class, paglabas nyo, no, from, may gate dyan sa, ano bang hall yun? Pangalan ng ating founder. Nicanor Hall, di ba? Nicanor Hall. Di ba meron dyang gate sa likod? Paglabas mo dyan, meron dyan nagluluto dati. Nagluluto ng tuhog-tuhog, tusok-tusok. Isa lang yung pinaglulutuan niyang kawali, no? With deep fat. Andyan yung fish ball, crab ball, chicken ball, squid ball, fish ball. Yan. Tapos pati yung hot dog, dyan na rin. Luluto. Pati yung lumpia. Lumpiang, ano yan? Ano yan? Paborito ko yan eh. Lumpiang toges. Sa mga paborito ko din. Okay. So, niluluto in the same fat. O, di ba nakatipid? Diba? Kaysa ihiwalay niya pa ng kawali yung hot dog at saka yung lumpiang toge, di ba? Pinakatipid siya, di ba? And more efficient. Wala nang transition, di ba? Okay. So it's really the transition and the setup, no, that adds to the cost. Tapos kung kailangan pa ng another facility, another cost yan, di ba? Another capital. Yeah. Okay, here I have an example, no, in the printing industry. Kung pareho lang requirement, halimbawa, parehong black ink ang gagamitin, pwede mo pagsamahin sa isang plaka. Called CTP plate, no? Pwede mo siyang pagsamahin, yung model, gagawin mo sa isang model, no? The sample ballots and flyers. Yeah, i-fit in mo lang doon sa isang na pwedeng mag-fit nga doon sa isang size na CTP, no? Kung pareho lang ng kulay, black lang, no? Black and white. I-run mo siya sa same machine, isang plaka lang, same machine, and then kakat lang yan sa, diba, last phase cutting. Ganun lang siya. Depende rin sa project, no? Kung colored yung isa black, hindi pwedeng pagsamahin sa isang plaka. Yan. Magkaibang salang yan. Okay? Kaibang molde. And then you have chicken and fries, which can be both cooked in the same roaster machine. Depende rin sa demand, no? If the demand is quite small, okay, wala ka pa large, hindi ka pa large scale production, so pinaglutuan ng chicken, pwede mo i-fry yung fries. No? Ganon. Pero ngayon, sa setup na laki ng demand sa chicken, laki ng demand sa fries, hindi pwede yan. No? You cannot enjoy economies of scope. If you insist doing that, you will incur these economies of scope. Okay, later, no, we'll have more, we'll discuss that separately. Okay, there, we have more companies to illustrate economies of scope. Jack and Jill Company, nutritive snack food, trainer ship, bring passengers and cargos. So there are three types of economies of scope. Number one, products are co-produced by the same process. Ibig sabihin, the same different products produced using the same process. Ibig sabihin, same ano din, equipment. Number two, production processes are complementary. Okay, may example niyan later. And then, another one, third, the inputs are shared. Inputs to production are shared by the products. Sabihin, same inputs. Medyo may konting changes lang. Minsan binabawasan, minsan dinadagdagan. Katulad dun sa, ano, diba yung corn is a raw material of many snack foods. Iiba lang yung shape, iiba lang yung spices, di ba? Pero yung pa din. Same material. Okay, kanina, complementary production process. Ito yung wala. Okay. So, meron tayo niya, no, dito sa FEU. students dun sa ITHM, ITHM, diba? ITHM students, diba merong Cafe Alfredo dyan? Yung mga OJT students, they hone their skills, no, in that cafe, no, cafe dyan, coffee shop. So that's where they test their or hone their baking skills and their barista skill, no. So nakatipid din yung mga estudyante. They don't need to travel far just to mag-OJT. So dyan magpa-practice na sila. Okay. Ngayon, si FU naman, less cost din, no? Tsaka complementary yung arrangement ng ganun. So kahit papaano, there is income, di ba? Although medyo hindi naman ganun kalaki, liit lang income. But that income can be used to support, no, that education, that part of education. So nakakatulong din siya sa estudyante, no? Tapos yung nare-reduce din yung cost ng institute. So complementary yun. So both of them, no, both parties are able to have or they're able to enjoy cost savings. Yun yung complementary. Okay, yung third naman, shared inputs. Restaurant can produce both chicken and fingers and French fries at a lower average expense than what it would cost two separate firms to produce. And then mentioned in our ebook is what we call acquisitions, mergers. They can agree, no, to use their resources to complement each other. So, di ba, yung mga acquisition ni Jollibee, ano yan, Inasal, ano pa ba yun? Inasal, Greenwich, ano pa? Isa pa eh. I forgot. Tatlo yan eh. Inasal, Greenwich. Halala nyo ba yung isa pa? Okay, anyway. So, kung halimbawa, kulang ng chicken si Jollibee, si Inasal, nakakatulong yung they could help each other, yung tatlong ano na yan. No? Diba, kulang ng tao, di pwedeng padala sa Jollibee o si Jollibee, padala niya yung workforce niya sa Inasal. Depende sa ano. Tapos yung input sila, they could share with each other then. Kasi pare-pareng gumagamit ng chicken yan tatlo, di ba? Jollibee, Inasal, Greenwich, pare-pareng may chicken, di ba? Pare-pare din silang gumagamit ng mga spices. So, they could share, no, their, ano, syempre accounted for yan. May accounting na. No? So, ganun lang. So, that's economies of scope. Mathematically, it could be expressed, no? The economies of scope can be expressed, no, like the cost of producing two inputs jointly, like cost of Q sub 1 and Q sub 2 is lesser than the cost of Q sub 1 plus cost of Q sub 20. So that's the mathematical expression for the economies of scope. Okay, so that's the bottom line. The bottom line is cutting the cost, no? Lowering the production cost. Okay. So it's not always the case that these practices, no, there's a limit to that. Not all products can be co-produced. No? Not all products could be it's not always economical to produce two or more products jointly or in the same facility or together. No, it's not always. You don't always bring down the cost that way because there are products that need to be produced separately in order to enjoy lower unit cost. And it's called these economies of scope. Now, if you insist, no, insist the economies of scale, which is not really possible. you cannot really always achieve economies of scale um, with some of the products, with the other products. These economies of scope mean multi-product production by a single firm that is less efficient than having separate firms, each specializing in the production of a single product. So sometimes, mas maganda yung maghiwalay, no? Like, i-conglomerate, no? Conglomerate na pinagsasama yung yung three or more businesses, no? Isang malaking so it becomes too large and unwieldy, ang hirap i-manage niya. So kailangan separate yan na business units, no? So ihiwalay mo yung iba yung you have a management team, no? Naka-focus lang doon, let's say sa aqua venture or sa agri ventures. Tapos you have a separate business unit for real estate development. Then you have another unit for export-import, ganon. Eh, di ba, there are companies, no, that have multiple products, no. I remember yung di ba si San Miguel Beer conglomerate, ang dami na rin beer yun. So hinihiwalay niya na yan, pinaghihiwalay niya na para maging efficient sila. So each of the business unit focuses on their line of business. Production can also exhibit these economies of scope when the cost of producing two products together is higher than the cost of separate production. So going back to our yun nga, di ba, sinabi ko na kanina, kung malaking order mo sa chicken, tsaka malaking order mo sa fries, hindi pwedeng hintayin mong maluto yung chicken para doon mo din lulutuin sa pinaghanguan ng chicken, doon mo lulutuin yung fries mo. Mawawalan ka ng customer, kasi maghihintay sila ng matagal. So it's very impractical. So what you will do, tataas din yung cost mo doon, tapos may losses ka pa. So what you will do is to have a separate equipment for cooking fries and a separate equipment for chicken, for fried chicken. And similarly, in the printing, kung malaking order mo din sa black printing, black and white, tapos malaki rin yung order mo sa colored, you might as well another machine that specializes in the production of or in the printing of black and white projects. Tapos, meron ka din separate na printer for your colored projects. Kasi, there's transition cost, tapos merong setup cost yan. Mahal din. Suma total, tataas din yung cost mo. And you will experience these economies of scale already. I'm sorry, this economies of scope. Economies of scope. Okay, so when we talk about scope, we're not talking about the bigness of order. Dito, and the unit cost. Nakafocus ka sa unit cost. Unit cost nung producing all of the products. Yung products, you have to sum up the production cost of all the products. I-compare mo dun sa if you will produce them separately. I-compare mo. Alin ba, saan ka makatipid? Producing them separately or producing them together? So, you have to calculate that. Animal snacks. Okay, this so lifted from our ebook. Animal snacks. A pet food company has 2,500 products SKUs. Stock keeping unit, this is SKU, with 200 different formulas. So it did some changes, reducing its offerings from 25 to 70 SKUs, using only 13 different formulas, and it began offering price discounts for larger orders. The company could consolidate small orders into large ones to reduce setup costs. So, yun ang setup cost. Yun ang nakakamahal. Kasi minsan yung setup mo, mahal yan. Makain ng oras yan. Binabayaran mo yung yung workers mo, nagsiset up ka ng katagal-tagal, o di idle sila, lugi ka na.